Can an ordinary wooden bucket, a jar containing a severed ear, some stolen cakes, or a lost football match really lead to a war? History proves that when wounded pride meets political ambition, even the most trivial incident can end with thousands of people dead. In this episode, you will discover 4 conflicts whose causes sound more like absurd jokes than real historical events. Stay until the end, because each reason for starting a war is even more ridiculous than the one before it.
History 1.
The War of the Oak Bucket. The year 1325. Medieval Italy was permanently divided into many small political states. Neighboring city-states could attack each other over the smallest disagreement. However, the real source of their deep hostility was a major political struggle between 2 groups. The Ghibellines supported the authority of the Holy Roman Empire, while the Guelphs supported the power of the Pope. In this complicated situation, Modena remained loyal to the emperor, while the neighboring city of Bologna was a proud stronghold of the Pope. Tensions between the 2 cities had been growing for decades. The situation was like a ticking time bomb, waiting for the smallest spark. That spark turned out to be something surprisingly ordinary and ridiculous. On the night between the 15th and the 16th of November, 1325, a small group of soldiers from Modena secretly entered the center of Bologna. They did not plan to burn buildings or murder anyone. Their target was a public well located next to the San Felice gate. The soldiers decided to play a cruel joke on their neighbors. They stole an ordinary oak bucket that the people of Bologna used every day to collect water. To make the humiliation even worse, the escaping soldiers filled the bucket with goods stolen from farms outside the city. When the people of Bologna discovered what had happened the following morning, the pride of both the citizens and the city authorities was deeply wounded. Instead of ignoring the loss of a cheap everyday object, the city council declared that the theft was an unacceptable insult to the honor of the entire state. Bologna officially demanded the immediate return of the stolen property. Modena proudly refused. In response, the people of Bologna made a radical decision. They announced a general mobilization and officially declared a full-scale war against their neighbors. In this way, one wooden bucket led to the Battle of Zappolino. 2 powerful armies faced each other. Bologna had around 32,000 infantry and cavalry soldiers, while Modena had only around 7,000 men. Although Bologna had a huge numerical advantage, Modena had much better tactics and the element of surprise. The bloody battle lasted only a few hours, but around 2,000 people were killed. Modena's forces completely defeated the invading army and chased the surviving soldiers all the way to the walls of the terrified city of Bologna. The war ended with a complete victory for the Ghibellines. Modena continues to celebrate this ridiculous success to this day. The historic bucket became the most valuable symbol of the city's military victory. For centuries, it hung inside the city's bell tower. Today, a faithful copy of the bucket is displayed in the Torre della Ghirlandina. It reminds the world that an ordinary and petty argument over a simple household object can cause an enormous tragedy and terrible bloodshed. The War of Jenkins's Ear. During the first half of the 18th century, maritime trade in the Caribbean was extremely profitable. At the same time, it was also the scene of a brutal colonial rivalry. Under the Treaty of Utrecht, Great Britain had the right to send only 1 merchant ship each year to the Spanish colonies. British merchants openly ignored these restrictions and carried out illegal smuggling on an enormous scale. Spain desperately wanted to protect its interests and its trading monopoly. For this reason, it created an aggressive coast guard known as the Guardia Costas. Its officers searched foreign ships without mercy and often tortured their crews. In April 1731, a Spanish warship intercepted a British brig called the Rebecca near the coast of Cuba. The captain of the ship was Robert Jenkins. The Spanish commander, Julio Leon Fandino, accused the crew of smuggling. He wanted to teach the rebellious British captain a memorable lesson. Jenkins was thrown onto the wooden deck and Fandino brutally cut off one of his ears. Fandino handed the severed ear back to Jenkins and said,
"Take this to your king and tell him that I will do exactly the same thing to him if I catch him smuggling."
Jenkins placed his ear inside a jar filled with salt water and sailed back to England. For 7 long years, the government in London deliberately tried to keep the incident quiet. Prime Minister Robert Walpole wanted to avoid an expensive and destructive conflict with Madrid at any cost. However, by 1738, anti-Spanish feelings in British society had reached a critical point. Members of the parliamentary opposition were supported by merchants who wanted free access to the wealth of the New World. They needed the perfect propaganda story. That was when Captain Jenkins entered the political stage. The sailor appeared before the House of Commons. He formally opened the jar and showed the shocked members of Parliament his dried and wrinkled ear. The sight caused absolute fury among both the politicians and the British public. The brutality of the Spanish was declared an unforgivable insult to the entire British crown. Calls for war quickly spread across the country. In October 1739, Great Britain officially declared war on Spain. What began with a single jar containing a severed ear turned into a bloody conflict that lasted for many years. Battles were fought at sea and on land in the Caribbean and North America. The war soon became part of a much larger European conflict known as the War of the Austrian Succession. More than 20,000 soldiers and sailors lost their lives. Dozens of large warships were sunk, and the economies of both powers were badly damaged. The war brutally proved that in international politics, a jar containing a severed ear could influence the fate of the world more than reason or common sense. The Pastry War. After gaining independence in 1821, Mexico became a country of permanent political instability. Military coups, local rebellions, anarchy, and street violence became a normal part of everyday life. The constant chaos affected not only the local population, but also foreign business owners who had decided to open businesses in the capital. One of these people was a French pastry chef named Remontel. He owned a successful and exclusive pastry shop in the district of Tacubaya on the outskirts of Mexico City. In 1828, a group of drunk and badly behaved Mexican officers entered Remontel's pastry shop without permission. The soldiers looted the elegant shop and completely destroyed its expensive imported equipment. Most importantly, they shamelessly ate all the luxury pastries that were available. They then left without making any attempt to pay their bill. The desperate pastry chef tried to receive justice and compensation from the Mexican authorities. However, the local courts ignored him. He finally decided to write a dramatic letter directly to the government in Paris and ask for help. Remontel's complaint received serious attention only 10 years later. King Louis-Philippe I was searching for a way to strengthen France's position in international politics. He also wanted to force Mexico to repay the money that it owed to French citizens. The government in Paris decided that the incident in the pastry shop was the perfect excuse for a military demonstration of French power. A French diplomat officially demanded that the Mexican government pay an enormous compensation of 600,000 pesos. For comparison, an average Mexican worker earned around 1 peso per day at that time. The demanded amount was deliberately and ridiculously high. The entire pastry shop was worth only a small part of that sum. The president of Mexico, Anastasio Bustamante, considered the demand to be an outrageous form of blackmail and firmly refused to pay. In response, the King of France sent a powerful military fleet to the Gulf of Mexico in the spring of 1838. The fleet was commanded by Admiral Charles Baudin. The French blocked the important port of Veracruz and began a heavy bombardment of the powerful fortress of San Juan de Ulua. Although the original cause of the conflict sounds comical, the war caused real and bloody suffering. Several hundred soldiers on both sides were killed or wounded. During this ridiculous war, the famous Mexican general Antonio López de Santa Anna lost one of his legs after being hit by a fragment from a French cannon shell. In the end, Mexico surrendered under strong diplomatic pressure from Great Britain. The Mexican government agreed to pay France the demanded 600,000 pesos. Mexico entered history as a country that fought a war over pastries that had been eaten without payment. The Football War. In June 1969, the attention of Central America was focused on football stadiums. The national teams of El Salvador and Honduras were facing each other in a fierce series of qualifying matches for the Football World Cup. However, football itself was not the main reason for the enormous tension between the two countries. Behind the sporting rivalry was a deep social and economic conflict that had been growing for years. El Salvador was a very small but extremely overcrowded country. It suffered from a serious shortage of farmland. As a result, more than 300,000 farmers from El Salvador had illegally moved to the larger neighboring country of Honduras. They hoped to find work and land there. The authoritarian government of Honduras was struggling with serious internal problems of its own. It decided to turn the immigrants from El Salvador into convenient scapegoats. The government began mass and often brutal deportations. Property belonging to the immigrants was taken away, and the media started an aggressive campaign against them. The atmosphere was filled with hatred. The football matches became the perfect trigger for an uncontrolled explosion of violence. Honduras won the first match in Tegucigalpa by 1-0. The defeat caused a national tragedy in El Salvador. A young woman named Emilia Bologna shot herself in front of her television because she was unable to accept the defeat of her national team. She immediately became a national martyr. 1 week later, El Salvador won the second match in San Salvador by 3-0. The home supporters created a nightmare for the visiting team. They publicly burned the flags of Honduras. They threw rotten eggs and stones at the football players. After the match, bloody riots broke out in the streets. The third and final match was played on neutral ground in Mexico. After a brutal period of extra time, El Salvador won by 3-2. Instead of offering sporting congratulations, the two countries immediately broke off all diplomatic relations. On the 14th of July, 1969, the Air Force of El Salvador launched a sudden and massive attack against airports and military bases in Honduras. At the same time, the army crossed the border. A regular war had begun. The fighting lasted for only 100 hours. For this reason, the conflict is also officially known as the 100 Hours War. Despite its short duration, the war caused terrifying and long-lasting consequences. Between 2,000 and 6,000 people were killed. Most of them were unarmed civilians. Several thousand more suffered serious injuries. Tens of thousands of people from El Salvador were forced to escape from Honduras and return to their home country. This placed enormous pressure on the already weak economy of El Salvador and led it towards complete economic disaster. Several years later, this situation directly contributed to the beginning of a bloody and destructive civil war. A football match that was supposed to be a celebration of sport became the direct cause of a tragedy involving two neighboring nations. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe to History One, and tell us in the comments what topic we should cover next.